Have you ever walked away from a conversation with the strange feeling that something wasn't right? The words sounded honest. The smile looked convincing. Everything appeared normal. Yet something deep inside you whispered that you hadn't been shown the whole truth. Most people ignore that feeling. They convince themselves they're overthinking. They choose comfort over awareness. But the Stoics believe that wisdom begins the moment you stop accepting appearances at face value. Marcus Aurelius spent his life surrounded by powerful people. Generals. Politicians. Advisors. Friends who praised him in public while secretly pursuing their own ambitions. He learned an uncomfortable lesson. People rarely reveal themselves through what they say. They reveal themselves through what they repeatedly do. The problem is that most of us spend our lives listening to words while completely missing behavior. We pay attention to promises instead of patterns. We trust confidence instead of consistency. We believe in emotions instead of actions. Then we wonder why we keep feeling disappointed. Here's the truth. Reading people isn't about becoming suspicious of everyone. It's about becoming aware enough that deception no longer surprises you. Because the greatest advantage in life isn't convincing people to reveal themselves. It's quietly noticing that they already have. Today, I want to share several Stoic observations that completely changed the way I understand human behavior. Not so you can judge people, but so you can stop misunderstanding them. Because once you learn to observe instead of react, you begin seeing things that most people never notice.
Welcome to True Stoic Journal, the path to inner control.
One of the biggest mistakes people make is believing they need to talk more to understand someone. The opposite is usually true. The more you speak, the less you observe. Epictetus reminded his students that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. Yet most conversations become competitions. People wait impatiently for their turn to speak. They aren't listening. They're preparing. But something remarkable happens when you remove that pressure. Instead of trying to impress someone, become curious about them. Allow silence to exist without rushing to fill it. Ask one sincere question. Then simply listen. Not to reply. To understand. You begin noticing details that normally disappear beneath ordinary conversation. The subjects people repeatedly return to. The moment their voice becomes softer. The memories they avoid. The things that unexpectedly make them emotional. People reveal themselves whenever they feel safe enough to stop performing. The interesting part is that very few people experience genuine attention anymore. They're interrupted, corrected, compared, judged. So when someone finally feels heard, they naturally begin revealing parts of themselves they usually keep hidden. Not because you've manipulated them. Because you've created something increasingly rare. Presence. I once met an elderly man during a train journey who spent nearly an hour talking about his childhood. At first, it sounded like ordinary storytelling. But gradually I realized he wasn't really talking about his childhood. He was talking about regret. About opportunities he never pursued. About words he never spoke. About forgiveness he never asked for. None of those ideas appeared directly. They were hidden inside every story he chose to tell. That conversation taught me something books never could. People rarely tell you who they are. They show you through the stories they cannot stop repeating. This is why Marcus Aurelius constantly observed before making judgments. He knew that first impressions belong to emotion. Understanding belongs to patience. Another lesson completely changed the way I looked at respect. For years, I believed kindness was measured by how warmly people treated me. Then I realized something uncomfortable. Almost everyone is capable of being kind when they benefit from it. Real character appears somewhere else entirely. Watch how someone behaves when they have nothing to gain. Observe how they speak to the waiter who accidentally brings the wrong meal. Notice how they respond to someone who cannot improve their career. Listen to the way they describe absent people. Character never disappears. It simply becomes more visible when no reward exists. Seneca believed that virtue isn't something we perform. It's something we practice consistently. That means respect isn't measured by public gestures. It's measured by private habits. Someone who speaks kindly only when others are watching isn't demonstrating integrity. They're demonstrating image management. There's a difference. The Stoics understood that consistency is far more valuable than charm. Charm attracts people. Character keeps them. Once you begin paying attention to consistency instead of personality, your understanding of people changes forever. You stop falling in love with potential. You stop believing beautiful promises without evidence. You stop confusing confidence with wisdom. Instead, you quietly ask yourself one simple question. Asterisk, is this person's behavior as consistent as their words? Asterisk, that single question has protected countless people from years of disappointment. Because actions rarely contradict the truth. Only words do. One of the clearest windows into a person's character is not what they say under pressure. It's what repeatedly captures their attention. Whatever dominates someone's mind will eventually shape their words. If every conversation turns into gossip, pay attention. If every success becomes a competition, pay attention. If every setback becomes someone else's fault, pay attention. People reveal their inner world long before they reveal their intentions. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the soul gradually takes the shape of its repeated thoughts. The same principle applies to everyone. Someone obsessed with status will constantly compare. Someone driven by insecurity will constantly seek approval. Someone at peace will naturally create peace around them. You don't have to analyze every sentence. Simply observe the direction their attention always travels. Eventually, patterns become impossible to ignore. Another lesson I learned took much longer to understand. People often tell you exactly who they are. The first time. We choose not to believe them. Someone warns you that they struggle with commitment. You assume your relationship will be different. Someone laughs about betraying an old friend. You convince yourself they have changed. Someone repeatedly avoids responsibility. You continue expecting accountability. Hope has a strange way of silencing reality. The Stoics encouraged us to see people as they are, not as we wish them to become. That doesn't mean becoming cynical. It means becoming honest. Because honesty protects peace far better than wishful thinking ever can. One difficult truth accepted today can prevent years of unnecessary suffering tomorrow. I've noticed that emotionally mature people rarely spend time trying to convince others who they are. They simply continue living according to their principles. Those who constantly announce their loyalty often struggle to remain loyal. Those who endlessly advertise their honesty often fear being questioned. Character doesn't need constant advertisement. It quietly introduces itself through consistency. That's why Epictetus believed your philosophy should be visible in your actions before it is heard in your words. Perhaps the greatest mistake we make is assuming every emotional reaction is caused by the present moment. Very often, people aren't responding to you. They're responding to memories. Old disappointments. Old betrayals. Old fears they never confronted. Someone becomes defensive over a harmless question. Someone withdraws after receiving genuine kindness. Someone overreacts to a small disagreement. If you only observe the surface, nothing makes sense. But if you understand that everyone carries invisible experiences, their behavior begins to look very different. This doesn't excuse harmful actions. It simply explains them. And understanding always creates clearer judgment than assumption. Seneca believed that wisdom requires seeing causes rather than merely criticizing outcomes. That lesson transformed the way I viewed difficult people. Instead of immediately asking, what's wrong with them? I quietly wondered, what have they experienced that taught them to behave this way? Sometimes the answer became obvious. Sometimes it remained hidden. But either way, compassion replaced confusion. At the same time, compassion never required abandoning healthy boundaries. The Stoics were compassionate. They were not naive. Understanding someone's pain doesn't mean accepting their destructive behavior. You can wish someone healing while still protecting your own peace. Those two ideas can exist together. One of the most overlooked signs of wisdom is emotional consistency. Notice the people who remain steady whether life praises them or criticizes them. They don't become arrogant during success. They don't become bitter during failure. Their emotions move. But their values remain anchored. That quiet stability is far more impressive than loud confidence. Because confidence built on circumstances disappears when circumstances change. Character remains. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire filled with uncertainty. Yet every day he reminded himself that true control begins within. The world could remain unpredictable. His response did not have to. That perspective changes the way you observe everyone around you. You stop asking, are they successful? And begin asking, are they consistent? You stop asking, are they impressive? And begin asking, are they trustworthy? The answers to those questions reveal far more about a person than appearance, charm, or reputation ever could. Eventually, you'll discover that reading people isn't really about becoming an expert on others. It's about becoming an expert on yourself. The more aware you become of your own emotions, your own assumptions, your own patterns, the more clearly you begin seeing everyone else. Because perception is always influenced by the condition of the observer. A restless mind rarely observes accurately. A calm mind notices everything. That's why Stoicism begins with self-mastery before it speaks about understanding the world. If your own emotions constantly cloud your judgment, every relationship becomes harder to understand. But when your mind becomes quieter, people reveal themselves without effort. Nothing magical has happened. You've become present enough to notice what was always there. If this message resonated with you, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who values wisdom over appearances, and subscribe to True Stoic Journal for more timeless lessons on self-mastery, human nature, and inner peace. Remember this: the wisest person in the room is rarely the one speaking the most. It's usually the one observing, listening deeply, and allowing people's actions to reveal truths that words never could.